Tonight, there is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing more needs to be solved before you rest. Nothing needs to be rehearsed for tomorrow. The day has carried you far enough. And for a little while, you may allow something else to carry you. Before you is a quiet river beneath a deep blue sky. The water is dark, but it is not empty. Moonlight rests upon it in long silver ribbons, loosening whenever the current passes and gathering again in the calm behind it. Far beneath the surface, small stones hold the last warmth of the day. Above, the stars appear one by one, not hurrying to become a sky. A wooden boat is waiting at the riverbank. It is just large enough for one traveler, with a curved roof of woven reeds and a small amber lantern hanging at the bow. The boat is tied loosely to the root of an enormous tree. You cannot yet see the whole tree. Its trunk rises beyond the river mist, wider than a house, and its branches travel outward until they seem to hold the night itself. This is the Sacred Banyan. For hundreds of years, travelers have followed the river to sleep beneath its branches. Some came carrying grief. Some came carrying questions. Others arrived with nothing they could name, only a tiredness that had settled deep inside them. The tree never asked which kind of traveler they were. It simply made room. Near the boat, a woman is lighting the last of the river lanterns. Her name is Mira. She wears a soft grey robe, and her dark hair is threaded with silver. She shields each little flame with one hand until it is steady, then lets the lantern drift into the current. She does not seem surprised to see you. "You found the river?" she says. Her voice is low and warm, as though the night has already softened every word. You look back, but the path that brought you here has disappeared into the trees. For a moment you wonder whether you should be concerned. Mira follows your gaze and smiles. "Paths rest too," she says. "It will return when morning needs it." She unties the boat and holds it steady while you step inside. The wooden seat gives a small, familiar creak. The lantern at the bow swings once, twice, and settles. There are no oars. You notice this only after Mira has taken her place at the stern and the riverbank has begun to slip quietly away. "How will we steer?" you ask. The river knows where the monastery is. The current carries you beneath the first low branches. Leaves move gently overhead, each one edged in moonlight. The smallest breeze travels through them in a long, soft wave. It begins far away on one side of the banyan and moves gradually across the canopy until the leaves above you whisper and then become still. Lanterns hang among the roots. Some are no larger than teacups. Others are round and pale, like little moons caught between the branches. Their reflections tremble on the water without ever quite breaking apart. Beyond the tree, a faint aurora moves along the horizon. Green becomes blue. Blue becomes violet. The colors are subtle enough that you might believe the sky is dreaming them. Mira sits without speaking, and because she is not trying to fill the silence becomes comfortable. You hear water touching the hull, leaves turning in the breeze, a night bird calling once from somewhere across the river. Then the quiet after the call, deeper than before. Your shoulders begin to remember that they can lower. Your hands discover that they do not need to hold anything. The boat rounds a curtain of hanging roots, and the monastery appears. It was hidden inside the banyan all along. Wooden rooms curve around the great central trunk. Narrow bridges pass between roots as thick as towers. Warm windows glow behind paper screens. Small gardens rest upon platforms just above the water, filled with white lotus flowers and grasses that bend gently beneath the breeze. Nothing in the monastery is entirely separate from the tree. A branch becomes the rail of a bridge. A root forms the wall of a quiet room. Steps have been carved only where the wood offered a place for them. Was the monastery built around the banyan? You ask. Mira considers this. At first, perhaps, but after enough years it becomes difficult to know whether we are sheltering the tree or the tree is sheltering us. The boat passes a stone landing where several pairs of sandals have been left neatly beneath a lantern. Beside them sits an old wooden chest. Its lid is open. Mira guides the boat close enough for you to step ashore. This is where travelers leave, whatever they do not require during the night. Inside the chest are ordinary things: a length of rope, a carpenter's ruler, a sealed letter, a child's red ribbon, a key without a lock. Yet somehow you understand that these are not the true things being kept here. They are only shapes given to burdens that were difficult to put down. You search your pockets, although you have brought no luggage. Still, you can feel what came with you. The unfinished thoughts, the conversations that continued after the other person had gone, the small decisions waiting for answers, the fear that if you stop at tending to everything, something important may slip beyond your control. Mira does not ask you to surrender any of it. Instead, she takes a smooth wooden token from beside the chest and places it in your palm. You do not have to let go of the whole day, she says. Only let the night hold it for you. The token is warm from the lantern light. You place it inside the chest. The change is almost too small to notice. The world does not tilt. No great answer arrives. But somewhere within you, one watchful part grows a little less watchful. Mira closes the lid. Everything will still be there if it is needed tomorrow. You return to the boat, and the river receives you once more. Ahead, 7 lanterns glow beneath 7 vast arches of the banyan. Each marks a place where a story has been kept. Mira tells you that you may listen to all of them. You do not need to remember their lessons. You do not even need to remain awake until their endings. A story can reach the part of you that is listening, she says, even while the rest of you sleeps. The first arch draws near. Beneath it, 2 pale ropes stretch from the bank to a little blue boat. The boat rocks gently between them, unable to follow the current and unable to return to shore. Mira lifts the lantern at the bow. Its light reaches the ropes, the waiting boat, and the beginning of the first story. The river slows. The leaves above you turn their silver edges toward the moon. And as the monastery settles more deeply into the night, Mira begins. Long before the lanterns were hung beneath the sacred banyan, there lived a boat maker named Saman. Saman built the finest river boats in the valley. He knew which timber would bend without breaking, which reeds would keep the rain outside, and how a hull should meet the current without disturbing it. Fishermen trusted his boats in deep water. Families used them to cross the river during the monsoon. Even the monastery kept one of Saman's little boats tied beneath its eastern steps. But although Saman trusted the boats he made, he did not trust the river. Each evening, when the day's work was finished, he checked the rope securing his own blue boat to the bank. He pulled the knot once, then twice, then a third time, because the third pull felt safer than two. One night, he woke with the thought that the rope might have loosened. The thought was very small. It arrived as quietly as a moth touching a window. Saman could have turned over and returned to sleep. Instead, he rose, carried a lantern down to the water, and checked the knot. It was secure. He returned to bed. Before sleep found him again, another thought arrived. The rope was secure now, but what if the river rose before morning? Saman went back outside. He tied a second rope from the stern of the boat to the root of a willow tree. Now it cannot drift downstream, he told himself. But as he climbed the path toward his house, he imagined the wind changing. What if the boat drifted upstream instead? So he tied a third rope from the bow to a stone post. The blue boat now sat between the willow and the post, held from two directions. Saman looked at it in the lantern light and felt the brief relief that comes when a worry has been answered. He slept until morning. The following evening, he checked all three knots. On the evening after that, he checked them again. Soon, he added a chain in case a rope became wet and stretched. Then, he drove another post into the earth in case the first post loosened. Each new protection gave him a little piece, but each also gave him one more thing to inspect. In time, checking the blue boat took longer than building one. Saman still told himself that this was simply the price of being careful. Yet his neighbors noticed that he no longer joined them for tea after sunset. He no longer sat beside the water to watch the moon rise. When he heard rain upon the roof, he did not hear rain. He heard ropes weakening, knots slipping, and water rising around an empty bank. One evening, an old nun named Annika came to collect the monastery boat after Saman repaired its wooden seat. The sun was low. The river carried wide paths of copper light between the reeds. Annika thanked Saman and stepped into the monastery boat, but she did not leave. She looked instead at the little blue boat bound to the bank. "Is that one still being built?" she asked. Saman almost laughed. "That is the best boat I have ever made." "Then why has it never moved?" "It moves," he said. "I take it onto the river." He tried to remember when he had last done so. Annika waited without correcting him. "The current is unpredictable," Saman continued, "and storms can arrive quickly in this valley. A person must take responsibility for what he values." Annika nodded. "A boat is worth caring for." Saman was pleased that she understood. Then she asked, "And what is a boat for?" He looked at her as though the answer were too obvious to require words. Crossing water, Annika rested her hands upon her knees. "Does yours?" The river touched the bank. The blue boat pulled gently against one rope and the end another. It moved no more than the length of a hand. "It could," Saman said. Of course. Annika pushed away from the landing. She did not offer him a teaching. She did not tell him to untie the boat. She simply lifted one hand in farewell and let the monastery boat follow the current around the bend. Her question remained behind. What is a boat for? That night, Saman dreamed he was sitting inside the blue boat. Ropes surrounded it in every direction, hundreds of them crossing above the water like a web. The river was perfectly calm. The sky was bright. On the opposite bank, his friends were calling to him, but there was always one more knot to loosen before he could leave. He worked until his fingers ached. Each time he untied a rope, he discovered two more beneath it. When he woke, dawn had not yet come. He could hear the real river moving beyond his window. Salmon carried his lantern down the path. The boat was safe. Every rope was tight. The chain rested exactly where he had placed it. Nothing had happened. And for the first time, Salmon understood that nothing happening had not made him peaceful. It had only made him ready to worry again tomorrow. He sat on the bank until the lantern grew dim. As the eastern sky became pale, he removed the chain. He did not remove everything. He was not ready for that. He took away only the chain and left the ropes. All day, while shaping the ribs of a new fishing boat, part of his mind returned to the missing chain. He imagined the ropes fraying. He imagined the river rising. He noticed the urge to replace it, and he let the urge remain without obeying it. That evening, the blue boat was still there. Saman checked the ropes twice instead of 3 times. On the next evening, he checked them once. Several days passed. He removed the rope tied to the stone post. The boat could now move a little farther with the current. Its bow turned toward the moon and then back toward the bank. The sight made Saman uncomfortable. It also made the boat look alive. At the end of the week, Annika returned along the riverside path. She carried a paper parcel of rice cakes from the monastery kitchen. She sat beside Saman without looking at the blue boat. They ate while evening gathered around the valley. After a while, Saman said, I removed some of the ropes. I saw. It could still drift away. It could? He waited for reassurance, but Annika gave him none. I thought you would tell me it was safe. I do not know whether it is safe. Saman frowned. This was not the calm wisdom he had expected from a nun. Annika brushed a grain of rice from her sleeve. Perhaps peace is not the knowledge that nothing can be lost. Perhaps it is the willingness to love something, even though it cannot be held forever. The blue boat rocked gently at the end of its remaining rope. Saman listened to wood touching water. He understood that he had been trying to turn uncertainty into certainty by adding ropes. But the ropes had never changed the nature of the river. They had only shortened the distance the boat could travel. He stood and walked to the willow root. His fingers rested upon the final knot. He did not untie it. Instead, he loosened it enough to take the boat onto the river. Annika stepped aboard without comment. Saman joined her and placed one hand on the tiller. The current took the hull, and the little blue boat moved away from the bank for the first time in many months. Saman's body remained tense. He noticed every change in the water. He watched the clouds. He listened for wind. Yet Beneath his vigilance was another feeling, quiet but unmistakable. The boat was doing what it had been made to do. They followed the river until the houses became small behind them. Reeds opened on either side. Fireflies appeared above the shallows. The first stars rested in the darkening water. "Should we turn back?" Saman asked. "Do you wish to?" He looked toward home. He imagined the familiar post, the willow root and all the knots waiting to be checked. Then he looked ahead. Not yet. They drifted a little farther. In the center of the river, Annika asked Saman to stop steering. "Only for the length of one breath," she said. He released the tiller. The boat did not overturn. It turned slowly with the current, found its own direction, and continued beneath the evening sky. Saman placed his hands in his lap. One breath became another. The river carried them around a quiet bend and revealed the Sacred Banyan, its lanterns shining between the roots. From the water, the great tree appeared to be floating among the stars. Saman had lived less than an hour away for his entire life. He had never seen it from the river at night. Something inside him softened. Not because the boat was guaranteed to return, and not because the river had promised to remain calm, but because he was finally present for the journey his caution had been preventing. When they reached the monastery landing, Saman tied the boat with one rope. He pulled the knot once. His hand wanted to pull it again. He smiled at the wanting, left the knot as it was, and followed Annika beneath the lanterns. In the morning, the boat was still there. Some mornings afterward, it had drifted a little along the bank. Once, after heavy rain, Saman found it resting among reeds 50 paces downstream. Each time, he brought it home. He repaired what required repairing. He replaced a rope when it truly became worn. But he never again asked a rope to remove uncertainty from the world. Years later, travelers knew Saman not only as the valley's finest boat maker, but as the man who gave every new owner a single piece of advice. "Tie your boat carefully," he would say, "then remember to sail it." Mira's voice becomes quiet. The little blue boat beneath the banyan rocks at the end of its 2 pale ropes. You watch one rope grow taut while the other loosens. Then the movement reverses. Back and forth, the boat obeys 2 directions and travels nowhere. Perhaps there are ropes like these within you. One may be tied to something that has already happened, a sentence you wish you could change, a choice you continue to examine, an older version of yourself you feel responsible for defending. Another may be tied to something that has not happened, tomorrow's answer, next week's problem, a future you have tried to prepare for from every possible direction. You do not have to cut either rope tonight. You need only notice that you are not the rope. You are not the knot. You are the traveler who may rest while the river continues. Mira reaches over the side and trails her fingers through the water. The ripples widen behind the boat, catching small pieces of lantern light. "Care is useful," she says, "but care was never meant to become a cage." The first arch of the banyan passes behind you. Ahead, the river opens into a perfectly still pool. A round moon rests upon its surface. On a stone platform at the center sits a young novice holding an empty bowl. He is leaning over the water, trying to lift the moon without breaking its reflection. The boat slows beside him. Mira places her lantern on the bow, and the second story begins. In the earliest years of the monastery, when its rooms were still built upon the riverbank rather than among the banyan roots, there lived a novice named Tavi. Tavi had a mind that noticed everything. He noticed when one floorboard sounded different from the others. He noticed when a lamp burned more quickly than it had the night before. During morning tea, he could tell which cup had been placed upon the tray first by the shape of the essence team above it. The teachers often praised his attention, but attention was not always gentle inside Tavi. Once his mind noticed something, it wanted to examine it from every side. A simple question became 3 questions. Each answer opened another door, and behind every door waited a corridor of possibilities. If rain began during the night, Tavi wondered whether the river would rise. If the river rose, he wondered whether the lower garden would flood. If the garden flooded, he wondered whether the lotus roots would survive. Before long, he was grieving flowers that were still resting safely beneath a clear sky. One evening, the head teacher asked Tavi to carry an empty clay bowl to the moon pool. "Fill it with clear water," she said, "and bring it to the meditation hall before the last lantern goes out." It was an ordinary task. Tavi had filled hundreds of bowls. He followed the path beneath the banyan and reached the pool. The night was windless. A full moon floated upon the water so clearly that the pool appeared to contain another sky. Tavi knelt and lowered the bowl. The instant its rim touched the surface, the moon shattered into silver fragments. He stopped. The ripples faded, and the reflection became whole again. Tavi tried a second time, moving more slowly. Again, the bowl disturbed the water. Again, the moon broke apart. He knew perfectly well that the moon in the sky had not changed, yet the beauty of the reflection made him reluctant to damage it, even for a moment. Perhaps, he thought, there was a way to take the water without breaking the moon. He waited until the pool was still. Then he placed the bowl beside the reflection rather than through it. But the curved side of the bowl sent a small wave across the surface. The moon stretched, divided, and vanished against the stones. Tavi moved to the other side of the pool. He tried dipping the bowl backward. He tried holding it almost flat. He tried entering the water at the edge and guiding the bowl beneath the reflection. Every attempt produced another ripple. The task that should have taken a minute began to occupy the evening. Tavi studied the shape of the pool. He watched the direction of the faint current. He calculated how long each ripple took to reach the opposite bank and return. He wondered whether the clay bowl was too wide. He wondered whether a wooden bowl would disturb the surface less. The last lantern at the eastern bridge went dark. Still, Tavi remained beside the water. An old gardener named Pema passed along the path carrying a bundle of cut herbs. She watched Tavi lower the empty bowl and pull it back once more. "Is the water unsuitable?" she asked. "The water is perfect." "Is the bowl cracked?" "The bowl is perfect too." Pema looked at the moon, then at Tavi. "That sounds like a difficult situation." Tavi explained that he had been asked to bring clear water to the hall. If he disturbed the reflection, even briefly, perhaps the water would no longer be perfectly clear. Perhaps he would be bringing agitated water into a room intended for calm. Pema listened with the seriousness of someone receiving important news. "What do you think you should do?" Tavi was relieved to be asked. He described 6 possible methods. He explained the advantage of waiting until the moon moved behind a branch. He considered returning at dawn when there would be no reflection. He suggested making a channel from the pool into the bowl, although that might disturb the mud beneath the stones. When he finished, Pema asked, "May I see the bowl?" Tavi handed it to her. Pema dipped it into the center of the moon. Silver light scattered across the pool. Water filled the bowl. Pema lifted it and gave it back. Tavi stared at the broken reflection. "You ruined it." "Wait." They waited. The ripples became smaller. The silver fragments drew closer. Before Tavi's breathing had settled, the moon was whole again. Pema pointed into the bowl. A second moon rested in the water Tavi held. "Now you have brought the moon with you," she said. Tavi carried the bowl toward the meditation hall. He walked carefully, but carefulness had become fear. Every movement sent tiny waves through the water. The reflected moon trembled from one side of the bowl to the other. He slowed. The more slowly he walked, the more closely he watched the surface. The more closely he watched, the larger every tremor appeared. His hands became tense. The tension created another tremor. Soon, the moon was shaking because Tavi was trying so hard to keep it still. Halfway to the hole, he stopped beneath a lantern. He could not go forward without disturbing the water. He could not go back without admitting that he had failed. He stood between the pool and the hall, holding a bowl that seemed to contain every problem in the world. Pema caught up with him. "The moon will not stay still," he whispered. "Are you certain it is the moon that is moving?" Tavi looked upward. The real moon hung above the banyan, immense and quiet. He looked down. Its smaller reflection shook inside the bowl. For a while, he said nothing. Then he continued walking. This time, he watched the path rather than the water. His hands relaxed around the bowl. The reflection still moved, but it no longer seemed like a mistake. It was simply what moonlight did when carried by a walking person. At the meditation hall, the head teacher was waiting. Tavi placed the bowl before her. "I'm sorry it took so long." "What delayed you?" "I was trying not to break the moon." The teacher looked into the bowl, where the reflection was settling once again. "And did you?" Tavi almost began explaining. He wanted to describe the pool, the ripples, the gardener, and every method he had considered. Then he looked through the open wall of the hall. The moon remained in the sky. "No," he said, "I could not reach the moon to break it." The teacher smiled. "Then perhaps the thing you were protecting was an image made by your own mind." She asked Tavi to place the bowl in the center of the hall. The other students gathered around it. Their footsteps disturbed the floor. The water moved and the reflection changed. When everyone sat down, it became still. During meditation, a breeze entered through the open screens and crossed the bowl. The moon lengthened into a path of light. Later, when the breeze faded, it became round again. No one tried to repair it. After that night, Tavi began visiting the moon pool whenever his thoughts became crowded. At first, He went there hoping to make his mind as smooth as the water. He sat very straight and tried not to think. But telling his mind not to think was like telling the river not to move. Every thought he pushed away returned as another ripple. So he remembered the bowl. He allowed each thought to change the reflection without believing it had changed the moon. A worry about tomorrow passed through him. The moon stretched. A memory of yesterday appeared. The moon divided. An answer he wanted but did not have crossed the surface. The moon became 100 trembling lights. Tavi waited. He did not chase the fragments. He did not force them together. He did not blame the water for moving. In its own time, the pool became still. Years passed, and Tavi became a teacher. Students came to him because he could listen to complicated questions without becoming lost inside them. When a novice arrived with a mind full of possibilities, Tavi never told them to stop thinking. Instead, he brought them a clay bowl. Together they carried water from the moon pool to the meditation hall. The reflection shook. It broke. It returned. By the time they reached the hall, most students understood something that words would only have made more complicated. Clarity did not require them to hold the mind perfectly still. It required them to stop mistaking every movement of the mind for a movement of the world. Back upon the river, the young novice on the stone platform finally lowers his bowl into the pool. The moon breaks into light. Water fills the bowl. He lifts it and sees the moon resting inside. For the first time that night, he smiles. Your boat drifts past him. Its wake reaches the platform, and the reflection in the pool becomes a long silver ribbon. Nothing has been harmed. Perhaps your mind has been carrying reflections too. A thought can feel enormous when you lean close to it. A concern may fill the entire bowl of attention. It may tremble whenever you move and convince you that stillness is something you must create before you are allowed to sleep. But the thought is not the sky. The reflection is not the moon. You do not need to smooth every ripple tonight. Let the water move if it is moving. Let a thought become bright, become stretched, become faint, and pass beyond the edge of the bowl. The moon does not need your protection. The night does not require your understanding, and sleep does not wait for a perfectly empty mind. For a little while, the boat remains upon the moon pool. Mira does not hurry toward the next story. She allows the silence after this one to widen naturally, like the circles left by a drop of water. The young novice carries his filled bowl from the stone platform. With every step, the reflected moon moves. It touches one side of the bowl, stretches into a silver curve, and gathers again near the center. The novice no longer stops to correct it. He watches the path beneath his feet. Soon, his lantern disappears between the roots. Above the pool, the real moon remains where it has always been. You may notice a thought moving through your own mind now. Perhaps it is a thought about this story. Perhaps it belongs to the day you have left at the landing. Perhaps it is only a small, unfinished piece of language with no importance at all. Let it move. There is room in the pool for a ripple. Another thought may follow. It may touch the first, cross it, and change the pattern of the reflected light. There is room for that too. The purpose of this night is not to keep the inner water untouched. Water that is alive responds to wind, warmth, footsteps, and rain. Stillness returns not because nothing ever moves, but because movement is allowed to complete itself. Mira takes a small cup from beneath her seat and lowers it into the river. She drinks without searching for a place where the moon is absent. When she offers the cup to you, the water is cool. For one moment, it holds a piece of silver sky. Then you drink, and the sky returns to being sky. Nothing has been lost. Along the edge of the pool, night flowers begin to open. Their pale petals were folded tightly during the day. Now, each flower releases itself by a fraction, no all at once, not according to a command. One petal loosens, then another, until a soft fragrance reaches the boat. The flowers do not ask whether they are opening correctly. They do not compare the shapes reflected beside them. One bloom is large. Another has been marked by rain. A third opens only halfway and rests there. The pool receives every reflection. A faint breeze travels beneath the banyan. It touches the flowers, crosses the water, and reaches your face. The moon becomes 1,000 narrow lines. For several breaths, there is no round reflection anywhere. Mira watches without concern. When the breeze moves onward, the lines come together. Slowly, without assistance, the moon returns. You can allow the same patience inside yourself. There is no need to decide which thought will be the last one before sleep. The mind may offer another, and another after that. Each can cross the water without becoming a task. You do not need to answer a thought merely because it is spoken. You do not need to follow a thought merely because it knows your name. You may hear it and remain in the boat. The lantern at the bow rocks gently. Amber light moves across Mira's hands. Where far inside the monastery, a wooden bell sounds once. The note crosses the pool. It is loud enough to be heard, then softer, then almost gone. No one reaches into the air to keep it. Its passing is part of its sound. The final vibration fades into the roots. Your mind does not have to become empty after the bell. It need only be allowed to hear what comes next. Water against wood, leaves above water, breath arriving without instruction. The ordinary music of a night that is not trying to prove it is peaceful. Mira lifts the lantern from the bow. The boat leaves the moon pool and enters a narrow waterway between the banyan roots. Above you, leaves turn in a soft current of air. A few loosen from their branches, and descend slowly toward the river. One lands beside the boat. Another circle once before resting upon the water. Ahead is a garden covered in fallen leaves. At its center, an old gardener is counting. He touches each leaf with the end of a bamboo stick, afraid that if he misses even one, something precious will disappear unnoticed. Mira guides the boat toward the garden steps. The third lantern is waiting there, its light warm among the leaves. The gardener's name was Wren. For most of his life, Wren cared for the oldest garden beneath the banyan tree. It was not a grand garden. There were no golden statues or fountains carved from marble. A narrow path curved between mossy stones. Flowering ginger and 7 SM all maples, whose branches leaned toward the river. Wren knew every part of it. He knew where the first violet would appear after winter. He knew which stone became warmest in the morning and where frogs sheltered when the summer rain arrived. He could recognize each maple by the sound its leaves made in the wind. The garden changed every day, and for many years Wren loved it for precisely that reason. Then, one autumn, he noticed a single red leaf upon the path. It came from the smallest maple beside the river. Wren picked it up and turned it between his fingers. The color was extraordinary red at its center, amber near the edges, with fine dark veins spreading from the stem. He carried it to his room and placed it inside a book. The next morning, 3 more leaves had fallen. Wren preserved those too. By the end of the week, he had filled the book and begun another. He told himself he was keeping a record of the garden's beauty. Soon he wondered whether the record could be complete. If every fallen leaf were gathered, counted, and labeled, then no part of the autumn would vanish without being remembered. Wren began rising before dawn. He sea-arched the paths with a lantern and wrote the number of leaves in a narrow ledger. 43 from the river maple, 28 from the tree beside the bell, 16 from the eastern wall. At first the counting pleased him. The rows of careful numbers made change orderly. Each leaf had a place. Each day could be accounted for. But autumn deepened. Leaves fell while Wren was eating. They fell while he swept the meditation hall. They fell at night when he could not see them. Wind carried some beyond the wall and others into the river. Wren began worrying about the ones he had missed. He stretched fine nets beneath the trees. He built little fences beside the path S. On windy nights, he slept lightly, listening for leaves touching the roof. When the monastery bell rang before sunrise, Wren was already outside counting. One morning, a child from the nearby village entered the garden. Her name was Leo, and she came each week with her mother to deliver rice. She loved walking through the fallen leaves because they made a dry whisper around her sandals. That morning, she ran along the path and kicked a bright cloud of them into the air. Wren hurried toward her. "Please stop." Leo froze. The leaves settled around her. Wren immediately regretted the sharpness in his voice, but his eyes had already begun searching. Which leaves had been moved? Had some crossed from one tree's section into another? How could he count them accurately now? Leo looked down. "Did I break the garden?" Wren followed her gaze. Nothing was broken. The maples still glowed beneath the morning light. A few leaves rested in Leo's hair. The scene was so beautiful that Wren nearly forgot his ledger. "No," he said more gently, "but I am trying to remember where everything belongs." Leo picked up a yellow leaf. "This one belongs here." She tucked it behind his ear. Then she chose a red one and placed it behind her own. "Now, this one belongs here." Wren smiled despite himself. Leo's mother called from the monastery kitchen. The child ran away, leaving the leaves exactly as a child would leave them, scattered without respect for categories. Wren tried to restore the path. Yet as he worked, he kept remembering her question. Did I break the garden? The answer was clearly no, but Wren had behaved as if beauty was so fragile that a child's footsteps could destroy it. That afternoon, wind arrived from the mountains. It entered the banyan canopy with a distant rushing sound. Branches bent, thousands of leaves lifted at once. They crossed paths, struck the roofs, gathered in corners, and poured over the garden wall. Ren stood in the center holding his ledger. The numbers became meaningless before his eyes. He tried to count what remained on the smallest maple, but the branches would not stay still. He tried to gather what had fallen, but each handful escaped the basket as soon as he turned away. At last, he spread the preservation books across the floor of his room and began comparing their leaves with the emptying trees. The first leaf he had saved was no longer brilliant red. Pressed between the pages, it had become dark and brittle. Its edges broke when touched. Ren realized that he had not preserved autumn. He had preserved leaves removed from autumn. Outside, the living garden was changing without him. He closed the book and returned to the path. The wind had softened. Leaves drifted down more slowly now. One landed on his shoulder. Another rested against his sleeve before continuing to the ground. Ren sat upon the warmest stone in the garden. For the first time that season, he watched a leaf fall without asking where it came from or where it would land. It began high in the river maple. A breeze lifted it above the branch. It turned once, showing its red side, then its amber side. It brushed another leaf in the air. Together they traveled over the path, separated, and came to rest in different places. The whole journey lasted only a few breaths. Ren had seen thousands of leaves fall. He could not remember ever truly watching one. The head gardener found him there near sunset. She noticed the closed ledger beside him and sat upon the next stone. "How many today?" she asked. "I do not know." "Then was the day wasted?" Ren looked around. The ground had become a tapestry of red, gold, and brown. The river carried little fleets of leaves beneath the roots. High above, the remaining branches reveal deep pieces of sky that had been hidden during summer. "No," he said. "I think I may have been wasting the days by counting them." The head gardener picked up the ledger. Page after page contained Ren's neat marks. "There is nothing wrong with remembering," she said, "but a record of a season is not the season. Sometimes we become so frightened of losing a moment that we leave the moment in order to guard its memory." Ren thought of his books, his nets, and the expression on Leo's face when she believed she had broken the garden. What should I do with the leaves I saved? What would the garden do with them? The following morning, Ren carried the books outside. He removed the pressed leaves one at a time and placed them beneath the maples. Some remained whole, others broke into small pieces. He covered them with a thin layer of soil and watered the ground. Nothing was lost. The leaves became part of the earth that would feed the roots. The roots would hold the trees. The trees would open new leaves when spring returned. Not the same leaves. That was never the promise. The garden promised only that change would continue creating room for life. Ren kept his ledger, but he tore out the pages of numbers. On the first empty page, he wrote a single sentence. Today, the leaves were beautiful. On the next day, he wrote the same thing. When Leah returned to the monastery, she paused cautiously at the garden entrance. Wren was sweeping leaves from the steps. He handed her a second broom. Together they made 2 piles. Then Leo jumped into hers. Leaves rose around her in a bright circle. Wren laughed. He pushed his own pile toward hers, and for several minutes neither of them cared which tree any leaf had come from. Afterward, they swept the leaves beneath the maples, where the earth would know what to do with them. Winter arrived. The 7 trees stood bare against the pale sky. Wren no longer saw emptiness in their branches. He saw openness. Moonlight reached the stones. Rain reached the roots. The garden rested without trying to resemble its summer self. In spring, small green leaves appeared. Wren did not count them. He touched the first one gently, welcomed it, and continued along the path. Years later, when younger gardeners asked how he remained peaceful during autumn, Wren never told them not to feel sadness. He loved the leaves, and because he loved them, their falling sometimes made him tender. But tenderness was different from resistance. He taught them to watch one leaf completely, to see it loosen, travel, and come to rest. Then to let the next leaf have its own journey. The tree does not call the falling leaf a failure, he would say. It simply makes room for the sky. Beneath the banyan tonight, Mira steps from the boat onto the garden landing. You follow her along the path. Leaves lie beneath your feet, soft from the evening mist. None are numbered. None have been placed incorrectly. Mira chooses one and holds it in the lantern light. Its edges are imperfect. A small insect has eaten a crescent from one side. Dark spots mark its surface. Yet the leaf is more beautiful for having belonged to weather, time, and a living tree. She gives it to you. Perhaps there are moments you have tried to preserve by returning to them again and again. A time when everything felt right. A person as they once were. A version of yourself who had not yet made a particular decision. Memory may hold the shape of such things, but it cannot prevent the season from changing. It does not need to. What mattered has already become part of you, just as fallen leaves become part of the ground. You are allowed to love what is past without standing guard over it tonight. You are allowed to let this day become yesterday. You are allowed to make room for the sky. Mira leads you farther into the garden before returning to the boat. Beyond the 7 maples is a narrow path you could not see from the water. Fallen leaves cover its stones so completely that each step makes a quiet rustle. The sound travels ahead of you and disappears among the shrubs. Small lanterns have been placed low beside the path. Their light reveals the leaves nearest to them and allows the rest to remain in shadow. Red becomes copper. Yellow becomes warm gold. Brown leaves hold a purple sheen where moonlight touches them. No color is asked to remain bright forever. At the end of the path, the gardener wren once built a little shelter for tools. The door is open. Inside are a broom, a watering jar, and the old ledger from which he removed the numbered pages. Mira opens it. The first page still reads, "Today, the leaves were beautiful." The next page says the same. Then again. The handwriting changes as the years pass. Some lines are firm, some tremble slightly with age. On one page, rain has blurred the ink. On another, A child's drawing of a leaf fills the space beneath the words. The sentence never tries to explain why the leaves were beautiful. It does not record how many remained, how many fell, or which shade appeared most often. It simply allows the day to have been itself. Imagine offering the same kindness to the day you have just lived. It may not have been an easy day. It may contain things you would prefer to change. There may have been tiredness, confusion, or moments when you were less patient than you hoped to be. Perhaps something beautiful occurred as well, but you were too occupied to recognize it fully. You do not need to decide what the entire day meant. You can close its ledger without completing the account. Today, the day was lived. That may be enough. Outside the shelter, another breeze moves through the maples. Leaves release in different ways. One falls directly. One travels beyond the wall. One becomes caught for a while in another branch before continuing. Mira sweeps none of them. She sits on the warm stone, and you sit nearby. From here, bare spaces have begun appearing among the branches. Through them, you can see the aurora moving above the river. Green light rises slowly into blue. Stars show through both colors. The tree has less to hold now, and because of that, more sky can enter the garden. There may be a space opening inside you as well, not an empty space that must be filled. A resting space, a place where something finished may remain finished. The mind often returns to what is over because it believes attention can still alter it. It turns the memory in the light. It searches for a different sentence, a clearer sign, a path that was not taken, but the leaf has completed its journey from the branch. You may place it gently upon the earth. The earth does not call this abandonment. The roots do not call it waste. What has passed becomes nourishment in ways that cannot always be seen from the surface. For several quiet minutes, you watch the garden without counting anything. A moth crosses one lantern. A drop of water falls from a leaf into a stone basin. Cloud passes before part of the moon and moves onward. Nothing needs to be recorded in order to have happened. Nothing needs to be repeated in order to have mattered. When Mira rises, she leaves the ledger open inside the shelter. The night air turns one page and then another. Blank paper waits without urgency. Tomorrow may write upon it when tomorrow arrives. You place the leaf upon the river. It moves beside the boat for a while, turning slowly in the reflected lantern light. Then the current chooses another path for it, and it drifts between the banyan roots. Mira does not ask you to watch until it disappears. She returns to the boat and you continue onward. The garden recedes behind a veil of hanging branches. Ahead, a long wooden room glows above the water. Through its open screens, you can see rows of looms and lengths of cloth moving gently in the night air. Only one loom is still being used. A weaver sits before it, pulling out the same silver thread she has woven and removed 100 times. The fourth lantern burns beside her. The weaver was called Suri, and no one at the monastery possessed hands as skilled as hers. She wove robes that felt light in summer and warm in winter. She repaired old cloth so carefully that even its owner could not find the place that had torn. When the monastery prepared a gift for a village wedding or the arrival of a child, everyone hoped Suri would make it. Her work was beautiful. It was also rarely finished. Suri could notice a flaw invisible to anyone else, a thread leaning slightly away from its neighbors, a band of color no wider than a grain of rice, a place where the tension had changed because she breathed differently while passing the shuttle through the loom. Whenever she found such a flaw, she unwove the cloth. Sometimes she removed an hour of work, sometimes a day. Once, while making a ceremonial hanging, she pulled apart 3 months of weaving because one silver thread caught the morning light differently from the rest. The other weavers begged her to leave it. "No one will see," they said. "I will see," Suri answered. This seemed to her like devotion. If a thing was worth making, it was worth making without error. One winter, the monastery asked Suri to weave a blanket for the oldest sleeping room. Travelers used that room when storms made the mountain roads unsafe. The blanket did not need to be ceremonial. It only needed to be warm. Suri chose wool, the color of evening clouds, and a thin silver thread for the border. She planned a pattern of banyan leaves, each one matching the next. She worked through the cold weeks. The center of the blanket grew beneath her hands. Gray wool crossed gray wool. Silver leaves appeared along the edge, precise and shining. Then, near the final corner, Suri made a mistake. She passed one silver thread over 2 gray threads instead of one. The difference was tiny. It changed the edge of a single leaf, making it curve a little more deeply than the others. Suri saw it immediately. She stopped the loom. Outside, rain had begun striking the roof. Wind moved through the banyan branches. Somewhere near the river, a bell sounded as the first travelers arrived seeking shelter. Suri began pulling out the silver thread. The cloth resisted. The wool had settled tightly around it. To reach the mistake, she would need to remove the entire border and part of the grey center. A young weaver named Nemi watched her. "The sleeping room needs the blanket tonight. Then I must work quickly. It is already warm." "It is wrong." Nemi found the curved leaf and touched it. "This one?" Suri nodded. "I like it." "Yep. You like it because you do not understand the pattern." The words came out more sharply than Suri intended. Nemi lowered her hand. Suri returned to the thread, but her fingers were tired. She pulled too firmly. The silver strand snapped. For several breaths, neither weaver moved. Now the floor was larger. Suri felt heat rise behind her eyes. She had spent the entire winter pursuing a perfect blanket, and in trying to correct one hidden mistake, she had created damage that anyone could see. She covered the loom and left the room. The storm continued all night. Travelers slept beneath old patched blankets while Suri lay awake listening to the rain. She replayed the moment at the loom. If she had noticed the thread one row earlier, she could have corrected it easily. If she had rested before weaving the border, perhaps she would not have made the mistake. If Nemi had not distracted her, perhaps the silver thread would not have snapped. Each thought offered a different past. None could be entered. Before dawn, Suri returned to the weaving room. Someone was sitting at her loom. It was an elderly traveler from the storm, a woman with a long white braid. She had folded the unfinished blanket across her knees and was examining the damaged corner. "Please do not touch that," Suri said. The woman looked up. "Were you making it for the sleeping room?" "I was. It cannot be used now." "Because of this broken thread?" Suri showed her the incorrect curve, the loosened border, and the place where the silver had snapped. The woman listened carefully. When Suri finished, she turned the blanket over. Along the back were hundreds of little knots, crossings, and hidden ends. No pattern was visible there. It looked nothing like the smooth surface Suri had worked so hard to create. "Which side is the true blanket?" the traveler asked. "Both sides." "Then it was already imperfect." Suri frowned. "The back is constructed that way. Those are not mistakes." "Ah," said the woman. "So some disorder may belong?" She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. The damaged corner hung near the floor. "It is warm," she said. "Warmth is not the only thing that matters." "No, but on a cold night it matters quite a lot." The traveler returned the blanket and left for the morning meal. Suri remained beside the loom. She thought of the people who had slept in the cold room while a warm blanket waited unfinished. She had wanted to honor them with flawless work. Yet somewhere along the way, she had begun serving the pattern instead of the people. Nemi entered quietly. Suri expected her to avoid the loom after yesterday's harsh words. Instead, the young weaver carried a box of spare thread. "I found 3 shades of silver," Nemi said. "None match perfectly." Suri opened the box. One thread was darker than the original. One was almost white. The third held a faint blue sheen. The old Suri would have rejected all 3. She chose the blue. Rather than hiding the break, she wove outward from it. The deeper curve of the mistaken leaf became the beginning of a small branch. Blue silver thread traveled along the border and opened into one new leaf, unlike all the others. Nemi watched the pattern emerge. "Now everyone will see it." "Yes," Suri said. Her hands were still skilled. Repair did not require her to pretend otherwise, but skill could respond to what had happened instead of endlessly trying to erase it. They finished the blanket before midday. That evening, another traveler slept beneath it. He did not inspect the border. He did not compare the leaves. He pulled the blanket to his chin and became warm. During the following years, the blue-silver leaf became the most loved part of the old sleeping room. Children searched for it before bed. Travelers touched it while telling stories. Some believed it had been woven deliberately as a reminder that every repeated pattern requires one place for the eye to rest. Suri never corrected them. She began finishing more of her work. This did not mean she stopped caring. She still repaired weak seams. She still replaced threads that would not survive washing. She remained patient with details others overlooked. But she learned to ask a new question whenever she found an imperfection. Does this prevent the cloth from giving what it was made to give? If the answer was yes, she repaired it. If the answer was no, she allowed the thread to remain part of the story. One afternoon, Nemi brought her a small robe she had woven for a child in the village. The sleeves were not quite the same length. Nemi's face showed the old distress Suri knew so well. "I have ruined it." Suri measured the sleeves. One was shorter by the width of her thumb. She could have told Nemi that the difference did not matter. Instead, she asked the child to try it on. The child had one arm slightly shorter than the other. The robe fit perfectly. Nemi laughed. Suri laughed too. Neither claimed the uneven sleeves had been planned. The mistake remained a mistake. It had simply arrived in a world that contained more possibilities than the pattern did. Many winters later, the old grey blanket became thin, its edges frayed, the silver leaves dulled. Suri repaired it with pieces of cloth left over from other work, red from a festival banner, gold from a wedding gift, green from a gardener's robe. Each repair made the blanket less perfect and more complete. At last, it held something from nearly every person who had worked in the weaving room. Travelers slept beneath a history of errors, changes, gifts, and second attempts. The blue-silver leaf remained in one corner. Suri would sometimes sit beside the sleeping room door and watch the blanket rise and fall with the traveler's breathing. It was giving what it had been made to give. That was enough. Tonight, in the weaving room above the river, the woman at the final loom stops pulling out the silver thread. She finds the little curve that does not match. Her hand rests there. Then she chooses a blue-silver strand and begins weaving forward. The loom makes a quiet wooden rhythm. Mira stands with you outside the open screen. Cloth moves gently overhead. Long shadows from the loom shift across the floor. Perhaps you have been unweaving parts of yourself, revisiting a sentence because it was not perfectly expressed, replaying a decision because another choice might have produced a cleaner pattern, holding today's work against an image of how it should have been. There may be things worth repairing tomorrow, but repair is different from punishment. Repair moves forward. Punishment pulls out the same thread again and again, hoping eventually to reach a past in which the mistake never occurred. You cannot return to that row of the weaving. You can choose the next thread. You can let an uneven place become the beginning of something gentler. You can allow what you have already made to give the warmth it was meant to give. The weaving room remains open while the newly finished blanket is carried to the sleeping chamber. Mira invites you to follow. The corridor between the rooms is lined with folded cloth. Each piece carries evidence of hands. A seam slightly wider near one end. A change of color where one bundle of thread finished. A patch sewn by someone whose stitches were larger than the original makers. Nothing here has the cold perfection of an object untouched by life. The cloth has been worn, washed, repaired, and offered again. In the sleeping chamber, a caretaker spreads the grey blanket across a low bed. Moonlight finds the blue-silver leaf. Its curve interrupts the repeated border and draws the eye gently toward the corner. The caretaker smooths the blanket once. She does not pull the cloth apart to straighten every thread. She prepares it for the person who will need warmth. You may imagine laying your own day across such a bed. Here is the part you completed well. Here is the part that remains uneven. Here is a place repaired so many times that the repair has become stronger than the original cloth. Here is a loose end that can wait until morning. The whole day may still cover you. It does not need to become flawless before it can be put down. Mira touches the blue-silver thread. Perfection often promises rest after one final correction, she says, but it always knows another correction. You may know this promise after one more message. after one more check, after understanding why something happened, after finding exactly the right plan. Then the mind says you may rest. But rest that must be earned through perfect completion is continually moved beyond reach. The blanket offers another way. Finish what genuinely must be finished. Repair what can be repaired with kindness. Then let warmth matter more than an invisible flaw. The caretaker lowers the room's lantern. The border becomes less distinct. Grey and silver soften into one quiet surface. What looked uneven in bright light becomes simply cloth in the dark. Night does this gently for many things. Edges lose their sharpness. Colors release their names. Objects become shapes, and shapes become shadow. The mind is allowed to become less exact as well. You do not need the precise word for every feeling. You do not need the final interpretation of every conversation. You do not need to inspect the hidden side of every moment. The loom has stopped for the night. Threads remain upon it. The shuttle rests halfway across a row. Tomorrow, the weaver will know where to begin, because the unfinished place has been left visible. Nothing is harmed by stopping there. Mira leads you back through the corridor. The cloth overhead moves in the breeze like slow water. For an instant, moonlight passes through the thinnest piece and lays a pale pattern across the floor. Then the cloth settles and the pattern changes. It was beautiful while it was there. It is not a failure because it changed. At the final doorway, a basket holds scraps too small for large work. The weaver saved them for patches. Red, green, gold, and blue wait together. Even what appears leftover may become exactly what some future repair requires. You do not need to know which piece will be used. You can leave the basket in the care of the weaving room. Mira lowers the screen of the weaving room. The loom's rhythm remains audible as you return to the boat. The river has grown darker. Stars move slowly between reflections of the banyan roots. In the distance, a figure is walking along a narrow bridge, carrying a large sack. The sack is labeled tomorrow. With every step, the traveler adds something else to it. Mira turns the boat toward the bridge and the fifth wedding lantern. The traveler's name was Arun, and he was known throughout his village as a person who prepared well. If rain was expected, Arun repaired his roof before the first cloud arrived. If a journey required 3 measures of rice, he packed 4. He remembered appointments, kept tools sharp, and never allowed the water jar to become empty. His foresight helped many people, but Arun did not know where preparation ended and fear began. Each night after completing the day's work, he opened a large canvas sack. Into it he placed everything that might be needed tomorrow. A cloak in case the morning was cold. An extra shirt in case the day became warm. A hammer in case the western fence loosened. Medicine in case his head ached. A second medicine in case the first one did not help. Before long, the sack contained food for delays, rope for accidents, letters not yet required, and answers to questions nobody had asked. Aaron labeled it tomorrow. He kept it beside his bed so that nothing could surprise him when he woke. The sack grew heavier each evening. Whenever Arun removed something because it was no longer needed, he thought of 2 new possibilities and added both. Soon, the sack was too large to remain beside the bed. He slept with his feet against it. Later, when it filled half the room, he began sleeping on the floor. His neighbor asked why he did not leave the sack at home during the day. "Because tomorrow can begin at any moment," Aaron said. So he carried it everywhere. At breakfast, Tomorrow occupied the second chair. In the fields, it rested upon his back. When friends invited him to sit by the river, he declined because placing the sack near water might damage its contents. One evening, Aaron received a letter from his sister, who lived beyond the mountain. "Come visit," she wrote. "The plum trees are flowering, and your niece has learned to write her name." Aaron wanted to go. He had not seen his sister in 2 years. He remembered the path over the mountain, the little house beneath the plum trees, and his niece asleep against his shoulder when she was a baby. He began preparing immediately. The journey required 2 days. Aaron packed for 6. He included clothes for heat, cold, and rain. He carried food in case the mountain inn was closed and a cooking pot in case he needed to camp. He added gifts for his sister, books for his niece, and tools in case their house required repair. The Tomorrow sack became so heavy that he could barely lift it. Still, before dawn, he set out. The path crossed the valley and climbed through cedar forest. Aaron took 20 steps, stopped to rest, then took 20 more. By sunrise, he had traveled less than a person carrying nothing would walk in half an hour. Near the first bridge, he met a monk named Jai. Jai carried a small cloth bundle and a walking stick. He was also crossing the mountain, so they agreed to travel together. "What is in the sack?" Jai asked. "Everything I may need." "You must have remarkable knowledge of what lies ahead." Aaron heard admiration in the monk's voice. "I try to consider every possibility." They continued upward. When clouds gathered over the ridge, Aaron opened the sack and searched for his rain cloak. It was buried beneath the cooking pot, the medicines, and 3 pairs of sandals. By the time he found it, the cloud had passed without rain. At midday, Jai stopped beside a spring and ate rice from his bundle. Aaron had packed more food, but it was at the bottom of Tomorrow. He was too tired to unpack everything, so Jai shared his meal. "Perhaps," Aaron said, "I arranged the sack poorly." "Perhaps. Tonight I will reorganize it." They climbed until evening. At the mountain inn, Aaron spread the contents across the floor. He sorted them by likelihood, urgency, and weight. He created one bundle for bad weather and another for injury. Then he imagined needing an item from both bundles at once, so he began again. Jai slept. Aaron worked past midnight. In the morning, his sack was organized perfectly, and somehow heavier than before. The road grew steep beyond the inn. Jai moved slowly, pausing whenever Aaron needed rest. Neither complained, but Aaron watched the sun cross the sky and knew the way would not reach his sister's house that day. Near the highest pass, they found a fallen tree across the path. Aaron felt briefly vindicated. He had packed a small saw for exactly such a problem, but the saw was somewhere inside the enormous sack. While Aaron searched, Jai stepped around the end of the tree. There was a narrow path through the grass. Aaron looked at the saw in his hand, then at the easy path. "I carried this all the way up the mountain." "Yes. And now it is unnecessary." "It appears so." Aaron became angry, not with Jai, but with the weight, the mountain, and every future that had refused to happen as expected. He sat on the fallen tree. "How do you travel with so little?" Jai opened his cloth bundle. It contained rice, a cup, a light robe, and a needle with thread. "What if it rains?" Aaron asked. "I become wet, or I find shelter." "What if you become ill?" "I ask for help, or I rest." "What if no one helps you?" Jai considered this. "Then I meet that difficulty when it is here." Aaron shook his head. "That is irresponsible." "It may be, but tell me, is your sister with us on this mountain?" "No." "Is your niece here?" "No." "Then has carrying every tomorrow helped you reach them?" Aaron looked back along the path. The valley stretched below in blue afternoon haze. He had climbed far, but not far enough. Tomorrow sat beside him, swollen with events that had never arrived. Jai picked up the cooking pot. "Will your sister have one?" "Yes." They left the pot beneath the fallen tree for another traveler who might truly need it. They removed the repair tools. Aaron's sister's village had carpenters. They removed the extra medicines. One simple remedy was enough for the journey. They kept the rain cloak because dark clouds were now moving over the pass. With each object, Jai asked the same question. Is this needed for the journey that is actually happening? Not the journey Aaron feared. Not every journey that could possibly occur. This journey, beneath this sky, toward the people waiting beyond the mountain. When they finished, the tomorrow sack was small enough to carry beneath one arm. Aaron stood. His body felt strangely light. The mountain had not become less steep. Uncertainty had not disappeared. But he was no longer climbing beneath the combined weight of 100 imaginary days. Rain began as they crossed the pass. Aaron smiled and put on the cloak. "You were right to bring it," Jai said, "and wrong to bring the cooking pot. Both can be true." They reached the village after dark. Aaron's sister opened the door and embraced him before he could apologize for arriving late. His niece stood behind her holding a sheet of paper. She had written her name in enormous uneven letters. Aaron almost missed it because part of him was already thinking about the return journey. Then he set tomorrow outside the door. He knelt beside his niece and looked carefully at each letter. That evening, they ate beneath the flowering plum trees. Petals drifted onto the table. Nobody knew whether rain would damage the blossoms during the night. Nobody tried to cover the whole orchard. Aaron remained for 7 days. Each morning, he prepared for what the day required. He repaired one loose shutter. He walked with his niece beside the stream. He helped his sister carry baskets to the market. When something unexpected happened, they responded together. He began to understand that preparation was a tool, not a place to live. Before returning home, Aaron removed the label from his sack. He wrote a new word upon it. Today. He packed water, rice, and a cloak. Then he left enough empty space for whatever the road might offer. Back beneath the sacred banyan, the traveler upon the bridge lowers his great sack. He opens it. Dark shapes rise from inside like birds. Imagined arguments. Possible mistakes. Storms that have not formed. Answers to questions tomorrow may never ask. One by one, they dissolve into the night. The sack becomes smaller. The traveler folds it beneath his arm and continues across the bridge. Perhaps tomorrow has been sitting beside your bed as well. Perhaps your mind has packed conversations, plans, and protections for a journey that has not begun. You do not have to throw away what is genuinely useful. You may keep the simple cloak, the small measure of rice, the knowledge that morning will give you hands, choices, and people you may ask for help. But you do not need to carry every possible day into this one. Night is the part of the journey in which the bag may be placed upon the ground. Tomorrow knows how to wait outside the door. The boat pauses beneath the bridge after the traveler has gone. His footsteps become softer on the wooden boards above, then disappear into the monastery. The bridge remains empty. The night beneath it is wide and calm. Mira takes a folded piece of cloth from the bow and places it beside you. It is a small traveling bag, light enough to hold in one hand. For the journey that is here, she says. Inside are only 3 things: a cup, a little rice, and a thin cloak. There is empty space around them. At first, the empty space may appear to be poor preparation. It could hold so many useful objects. A second cloak, another meal, a tool for a problem that has not yet appeared. But empty space has its own usefulness. It allows the bag to remain light. It allows something unexpected to be received. It allows the traveler to walk without being bent beneath possibilities. The same may be true of the hours ahead. You do not need to fill tomorrow before entering it. Morning may contain a conversation, a task, a change of plan, or a moment you could not have predicted. It will also contain resources that do not exist tonight. New information, renewed strength, the help of another person, the clear light of the actual moment. Tonight's mind cannot use tomorrow's information because tomorrow has not offered it yet. You may leave space for it. Above the bridge, clouds pass slowly through the aurora. Their edges become green, then blue, then dark again. None knows what shape it will have when it reaches the other side of the sky. Still, each cloud moves without carrying a map of every possible wind. Mira opens the little bag and removes the cloak. She folds it once and places it across your knees. The fabric is warm. This is preparation for what is actually here. The night is cool, so there is a cloak. You are resting, so there is somewhere to sit. You are listening, so there is a voice. Nothing more is required from this moment. If the mind brings you tomorrow's list, you may picture placing the list inside the large sack outside the monastery door. The list will not be destroyed. Ink will remain upon the paper. When morning comes, you may open it and choose the first real step. But a list does not become more complete because it is held through the night. A decision does not necessarily become wiser because it is rehearsed while the body is tired. Some answers arrive only after the questions have been allowed to rest. Mira dips the cup into the river and places it beside the rice. 3 useful things: water, food, warmth. She closes the bag. It weighs almost nothing. For several breaths, notice the support already beneath you. The boat holds your body. The river holds the boat. The riverbed holds the water. The earth holds the riverbed. You are not personally holding the whole arrangement together. You are being carried by layers of support that continue without instruction. Even the breath is preparing only for itself. It does not store enough air for tomorrow morning. It receives what is needed now, releases what is finished, and trusts another breath to arrive. In and out. Not as a task, not as something to improve, only as evidence that the body understands present time. The current turns the boat slowly beneath the bridge. You see the path ahead, lit by floating lanterns, and the path behind, disappearing among the roots. Neither direction needs to be traveled now. Here, in the center, the boat rocks gently. The small bag rests beside you with room inside. Tomorrow waits without being abandoned. Mira guides the boat beneath the bridge. The traveler's footsteps fade above you. On the far side, dozens of lanterns float close to the water. Each flame lights the next, without becoming smaller. Their warm reflections join until the river looks like a path made of stars. At the center of them sits a woman holding one unlit lantern. She has given away so much of her light that she believes none remains for herself. Mira reaches for the 6th lantern, and the boat enters the golden water. The woman among the lanterns was named Luma. She lived in a village where every house kept a small flame burning beside the door. On winter evenings, the lights showed travelers where the road curved. During storms, they helped families find one another through the rain. Luma tended the first lantern at the eastern edge of the village. Whenever someone's flame went out, they came to her. She would open the little glass door, touch a taper to her wick, and carry the new flame to their lantern. Nothing appeared to leave Luma's light. 1 flame became 2. 2 became 3. The road grew brighter. Luma loved being able to help, but gradually she began believing that every light was hers to maintain. If a neighbor's lantern dimmed, she hurried to trim it. If a traveler seemed uncertain, she walked beside them even after they knew the way. She filled other people's oil cups before checking her own. The villagers thanked her, and every thank you made it harder for Luma to rest. One wet winter, illness passed through the valley. Luma brought meals, gathered medicine, and sat beside those who could not sleep. She moved from house to house beneath the rain, carrying her lantern before her. At first, its flame was steady. Then, the oil grew low. Luma noticed, but the house ahead was dark. She told herself she would refill the cup after one more visit. Inside that house, an elderly man needed firewood. Beyond it, a mother needed someone to watch her sleeping child. By the time Luma returned to the road, her lantern had become a faint blue point. She cupped both hands around it. "Please," she whispered. "Not yet." The flame went out. Darkness closed around her. Luma felt ashamed. The keeper of the eastern light had allowed her own lantern too. Oh, fail. She imagined every person who might now lose the road because she could no longer guide them. Then, through the rain, another light appeared. A young man approached, carrying the lantern Luma had lit for his family many years before. "I saw yours go dark," he said. He touched his flame to her wick. Luma's lantern became bright again. Before she could thank him, 2 more villagers arrived. One carried warm oil. Another held an umbrella above them all. Each lantern on the road had begun with Luma's flame, yet none belonged only to her now. "Go home," the young man said. "We can tend the eastern road tonight." Luma resisted. "There are sick families." "We know. The widow near the bridge needs wood." "It has been delivered. And the child in the blue house is asleep. Her aunt is with her." The village had not stopped caring when Luma became tired. Care had travelled from person to person just as flame travelled from wick to wick. She went home. For the first time in many nights, Luma placed her lantern upon the table and sat beside it without carrying it anywhere. She watched the flame move gently behind the glass. Resting did not make it smaller. In the morning, neighbours arrived with rice, dry wood, and fresh oil. Luma tried to refuse. "These are for people who need them," she said. An older neighbour smiled. "Today, that includes you." Luma began to understand that receiving was not the opposite of generosity. It was one half of the same movement. A person who never allowed anyone to give could not truly share a life with them. She could only stand outside the circle and pour herself inward. As her strength returned, Luma changed how the eastern lantern was tended. She taught 6 others to trim the wick and refill the oil. They created a simple roster. Each person watched the road for one evening and rested on the others. The light became more dependable, not less. Luma still helped neighbours. She still carried meals and sat beside frightened people. But before leaving home, she checked the oil in her own lantern. When she became tired, she said so. When another person offered to walk the road, she handed them the flame without believing she had failed. One evening, a little girl asked why giving fire did not make a lantern darker. Luma placed 2 unlit candles on the table. She lit the first from her lantern, then the second from the first. "Some things become smaller when divided," she said. "A loaf of bread, a bowl of rice, the hours of one person's day. We must notice those limits and respect them." 3 flames now shone before them. But kindness is not kept alive by one person burning alone. It survives by travelling. Years passed. The eastern road became known for its long procession of lights. Travellers arriving after dark could follow them from the river all the way to the village square. No one could say which flame was the original. That no longer mattered. On the final winter of Luma's life, she was too old to tend the road. She sat beside her window and watched other lantern keepers moving through the dusk. One by one, the lights appeared. The first was lit by a baker, the second by a child, the third by the grown son of the man who had once relit Luma's lantern in the rain. The road glowed without requiring her to walk it. Luma rested her hands in her lap. She had not created a village dependent upon her light. She had helped create a village that knew how to share light. That was the greater gift. Upon the Banyan River, the woman with the unlit lantern looks up. Lights surround her. Every flame she once shared is returning, not to demand more, but to offer warmth. She opens the glass door. A neighbouring lantern touches hers. The wick catches. Golden light fills her face, and the river carries the brightness outward in widening paths. Perhaps you have been carrying a lantern for many people. Perhaps you have mistaken exhaustion for proof that your care is genuine. There are limits that kindness must respect. Your hours can be spent. Your body can become tired. Your attention can need quiet. Rest is not the extinguishing of compassion. It is oil returned to the lamp. You may let another person tend the road tonight. You may receive the warmth you would offer without hesitation to somebody else. Mira lifts one of the floating lanterns from the river. Its clay base is warm, and a small brass cup holds the oil. The flame is bright, but not large. It lights Mira's face, the edge of the boat, and a circle of water no wider than your outstretched arms. Beyond that circle, the river remains dark. The lantern does not strain to illuminate the distant bank. It gives the light available to it where it is. Perhaps you have asked your own care to reach too far, into decisions other people must make, into feelings you cannot repair for them, into every dark part of a road that continues beyond the reach of your hands. Care can accompany another person without becoming responsible for their entire journey. A lantern may show the next step. It does not need to become the sun. Mira returns the light to the water. It rejoins the others, each with its own small circle. Together they make a path, not because one lantern gives everything, but because many lights are allowed to contribute. On the near bank, monastery residents are preparing more lanterns. One person trims wicks, one fills oil cups, one cleans rain marks from the glass. Another sits nearby and rests before taking the next watch. No task is treated as proof of worth. No person is required to remain useful every moment. The resting keeper is still part of the circle. If you have spent today caring for others, let the night recognize that labor. Even love willingly offered can leave the body tired. You do not have to resent the people you love in order to admit that you need quiet. If you have spent today caring for nobody but yourself, let that be permitted to owe. There are seasons when keeping one small flame alive is enough. If you feel you have not cared well enough, tonight is not a courtroom in which the heart must defend itself. Tomorrow may offer a repair, an apology, or another opportunity to give. For now, oil returns to the lamp. Mira shows you a lantern with a wick burned down too low. Its flame is weak and smoky. She does not scold it for failing to shine. She extinguishes it gently, replaces the wick, and fills the empty cup. Only then does she relight it. The new flame is clear. There may be a kindness in allowing your own flame to go low for the night. Not every dimming is a loss. The moon dims behind cloud and returns. The aurora fades from one part of the sky and gathers in another. Lanterns are lowered so their oil may be replaced. Darkness is not always the absence of care. Sometimes it is the room in which care renews itself. The boat drifts among the lights for a long while. Some lanterns pass close enough that their warmth reaches you. Others remain distant points. A few enter side channels and disappear. You do not have to follow each one. You do not have to know who will receive its light. What you have given may continue in forms you will never witness. A patient word may be remembered years later. A small generosity may be passed from one person to another. A boundary spoken kindly may teach someone that love and limit can exist together. You are not required to manage the journey of every flame after it leaves your hands. Let it travel. Let another person carry it. Let the road be tended by more lives than your own. Mira rests both hands in her lap. For this part of the river, she tends nothing. The lanterns float safely. The boat follows the current. Her stillness is not neglect. It is trust shared with the night. Mira moves the boat among the floating lanterns. Their reflections overlap, separate, and overlap again. No single light must illuminate the whole river. Beyond the golden water, the banyan roots descend into a darker channel. The current becomes audible against smooth stones. At the channel's center rests one large black stone. Water presses against it from every side. The stone seems to be holding itself rigid, as though resisting the river requires all its strength. The seventh lantern shines upon the bank. Mira lets the boat follow the current toward it. At the beginning of the rainy season, a piece of dark stone broke from the mountain. It fell through cedar branches, struck the steep earth, and came to rest in a young river. The stone had known stillness inside the mountain. It had been held among other stone, surrounded by deep silence. The river was nothing like that. Water pushed against it without pause. The stone resisted. It pressed its sharp edges into the riverbed and refused to move. When water rose, the stone held harder. When sand shifted beneath it, the stone found another place to grip. "You will not carry me away," it told the river. The river did not answer. It simply continued. Seasons passed. Branches struck the stone. Floodwater rolled smaller rocks against it. Winter entered its cracks, and summer warmed its surface. Each change felt like an attack. The stone believed that remaining exactly as it had been was the only way to remain itself. Nearby lived a pale river stone, smooth and round from many years of travel. "How can you allow the water to move you?" the dark stone asked. "Sometimes it moves me," said the pale stone. "Sometimes it moves around me." "But you are no longer shaped as you were." "That is true." The dark stone considered this proof of defeat. During the next great storm, the river climbed higher than ever before. Water thundered between the banks. The dark stone drove itself into the bed and fought the current with every edge. The earth beneath it washed away. For one frightening moment, nothing held the stone. It rolled. The world became water, darkness, and sound. The stone struck the riverbed, lifted again, and traveled farther in one night than it had moved during all its years in the mountain. At last, the flood placed it in a quiet pool beneath the sacred banyan. The dark stone waited for the current to attack again. Here, water moved gently over its surface. Fine sand settled around it. Moonlight reached it through the leaves. The pale stone arrived several days later and came to rest nearby. "I failed," said the dark stone. "The river moved me." "Where were you trying to remain?" The dark stone remembered the narrow mountain channel, the floods and years of fear. "Where I had always been." "And are you still stone?" The dark stone felt its weight upon the sand. It felt the cool water and the edges that remained its own. Yes? Then perhaps movement changed your place without removing your nature. The dark stone did not immediately become peaceful. When the current strengthened, it still tried to grip. When sand shifted, fear still traveled through it. But little by little, it experimented with not resisting every movement. A current turned it slightly toward the moon. It allowed the turning. Rain raised the pool and carried it the length of a branch. It allowed the journey. Sand covered one side and later uncovered it. The stone remained. Years softened its sharpest edges. Small creatures sheltered beneath it. Moss grew upon the surface that received morning light. The stone discovered that surrender was not disappearance. It was participation in a world already moving. One summer, a child found the stone beside the banyan pool. Its surface had become smooth enough to hold comfortably. She lifted it, admired the dark color, and carried it to the monastery garden. There she placed it beside a path among white flowers. For another year, the stone rested beneath sunlight and rain. It heard footsteps and evening bells. Nothing about this life could have been imagined from its old place in the mountain river. Eventually, a storm washed it back into the pool. The stone entered the water without fear. It no longer asked the river for a permanent resting place. Wherever it paused, it rested. Whenever movement came, it moved. Back in the boat, you pass the black stone beneath the surface. Water glides over it. Moonlight trembles on its smooth back. The stone is not struggling, yet it has not vanished. Perhaps you have been bracing against a current that is already here. A change you did not choose. A feeling you hoped would be gone by now. A day that refused to follow the route you planned. You do not have to approve of everything that happened. You do not have to call difficulty beautiful. For tonight, you may simply stop pushing against the fact that this moment is the moment you are in. The bed beneath you can be the riverbed. The night can move around you. You may remain yourself without remaining tense. For a while, the boat circles the quiet pool where the dark stone rests. The current here is slow enough to reveal what faster water hides. Beneath the surface are stones of many shapes, pale, dark, round, flat, marked with veins of silver or rust. None chose where the river placed it tonight. Water passes over all of them. Some divide the current. Some create little sheltered spaces behind them. Some lie beneath sand, with only one smooth edge visible. The river does not ask them to respond in the same way. Mira lowers the lantern near the surface. Light enters the water and moves across the riverbed. The stones appear to shift, although they remain where they are. Reflection and current create the movement. You may have mistaken such movement for instability within yourself. The world changes light around you. A tired evening can make an old worry look larger. A difficult conversation can darken things that seemed clear in the morning. A piece of news can send moving patterns across the whole inner riverbed. Beneath the changing light, something in you may still be resting. You do not have to locate it precisely. You may simply allow that possibility. The boat passes through a narrow current. For a moment it turns sideways. Mira does not fight the movement. She waits, one hand near the rail. The river straightens the boat on the other side. Not every correction must happen immediately. Some balance returns when interference stops. This does not mean doing nothing in every difficulty. The stone may need to move from dangerous water. The boat may sometimes need steering. Wisdom includes action. But action taken from constant bracing becomes exhausting. The body cannot distinguish every imagined current from a real one when it is never allowed to soften. Tonight, the river is gentle. Tonight, the boat is sound. Tonight, Mira is awake beside you. You may loosen the grip intended for another kind of water. Notice where the body touches support. Perhaps the back is held. Perhaps the head rests against something soft. Perhaps the hands can become a little heavier. There is no need to force relaxation. Force would only become another current to resist. Let softness arrive where it arrives. Let tension remain where it is not ready to leave. Even tension may be held without conflict. The dark stone once believed it had to choose between resisting the river and disappearing into it. It discovered a third possibility: allowing contact, water touching stone, stone shaping water, neither destroyed. You can allow the night to touch you in the same way. Sound may reach you without requiring attention. Thought may reach you without requiring an answer. Sleepiness may reach you without requiring permission. The boundaries of the self do not need to vanish. They may simply become less guarded. Above the pool, mist moves between the roots in several thin ribbons. It does not gather into one heavy cloud. Each ribbon follows a slightly different current of air. One crosses the moonlight and becomes bright. Another remains almost invisible near the water. The mist changes shape without concern. It is still mist. The river changes direction without ceasing to be a river. The stone changes place without ceasing to be stone. And you may change from waking towards sleep without losing anything that must return in the morning. The boat completes its slow circle. Mira's lantern once again passes over the dark stone. This time, you see moss growing along one side, fine and green. A tiny water creature rests beneath its edge. The stone's long journey has made shelter. What softened it did not make it useless. What changed it did not make it less real. The current carries you toward the final landing. Mira's lantern passes over the stone and continues downstream. The 7-story lanterns are now behind you. Their lights remain visible among the roots, 7 warm points marking 7 things the night can hold. The river curves toward the great central trunk of the banyan. There, beneath the widest branches, a sleeping platform waits above the water. Mira guides the boat home. The boat touches the final landing so softly that you feel only the change from drifting to stillness. Mira steps ashore and holds the lantern while you follow. A narrow stair curves upward through the banyan roots. Each step has been worn smooth by travelers who came before you carrying their own days. At the top is a quiet room open to the night. There are no walls on the riverside. Branches form a shelter overhead. A low bed rests beneath pale cloth, and beside it stands a small table with a bowl of water. The moon is reflected there. It trembles slightly as you enter. You do not need to make it still. Mira places the lantern beside the bed. Its flame is low and well supplied with oil. Outside, a leaf loosens from the banyan. It travels past the open room, turns on CE in the moonlight and continues toward the river. You do not need to count it. Somewhere below, a loom makes one final wooden sound and becomes quiet. The imperfect thread remains safely inside the finished cloth. Tomorrow's sack has been left outside the door. The road is being tended by many lanterns. The river moves over the stones without asking them to become anything else. You lie down. The bed receives your weight without requiring an explanation for it. The cloth above you moves with the smallest breeze. Shadows of leaves cross it as slowly, darkening and becoming pale, appearing and passing away. Mira sits near the doorway. She will keep speaking for a while, but you do not need to follow every word. Her voice may become another quiet part of the monastery, like water beneath the roots or wind moving through distant leaves. The day is inside the wooden chest at the first landing. It has not been destroyed. Nothing important has been thrown away. The night is simply holding it where you do not have to hold it yourself. The boat is tied with one careful rope. The moon moves freely in the bowl. The fallen leaves rest upon the earth. The blanket is warm despite its uneven thread. Tomorrow waits beyond the mountain. Your lantern has enough oil. The stone rests in the river. And you are here, beneath the banyan, where there is nowhere else you need to be. Allow the muscles around your eyes to become less interested in the room. Allow your jaw to rest in whatever position asks the least from it. There is no correct way to lie here, no perfect breath to take, no particular moment at which sleep must begin. Sleep is not an achievement. It is the river continuing when the traveler stops steering. The aurora moves slowly beyond the branches. Blue becomes green. Green becomes a faint silver that is almost indistinguishable from moonlight. A shooting star crosses the open sky. It asks for no wish. Another may come later. You do not need to remain awake to see it. Down on the river, the floating lanterns separate gently. Some follow the near bank. Others enter the darker water beneath the roots. Each carries only enough light for the small circle around it. That is enough light. This is enough night. You have done enough for one day. Mira's voice grows softer. She begins to tell you about the hours after midnight at the monastery. They are the hours few visitors remember seeing. The last kitchen lamp is lowered. The final cup is washed and placed upside down upon a wooden shelf. Sandals remain beside doorways. The bridges become empty, and the lanterns beneath them shine only for the river. No one asks whether the monastery is using the night well. No one measures the darkness. The hours are allowed to pass quietly. In the garden, dew gathers upon the maple leaves. Each drop begins too small to see. A trace of moisture becomes a bright point. Then, a tiny clear world holding an upside-down lantern. When the leaf bends, the drop enters the soil. Another gathers. There is no hurry. In the weaving room, unfinished cloth rests on the looms. Threads are held lightly in place. The weavers trust that their hands will recognize the pattern after sleep. Nothing unravels because it is unattended for a few hours. At the moon pool, the clay bowl remains upon the stone platform. Cloud moves across the sky, and for a while the bowl contains only darkness. It does not search for the reflection. When the cloud passes, moonlight returns by itself. Beside the first landing, the wooden chest holds the day. Inside are questions, plans, names, and small concerns. They lie quietly together. None grows more urgent because you are not examining it. The chest is strong. The lid is closed. Morning knows where to find it. For now, let the body become part of these midnight hours. The forehead may smooth, or it may not. The shoulders may lower, or they may remain exactly where they are. The legs may feel heavy, warm, distant, or simply present. There is nothing you must feel in order to continue towards sleep. Mira's voice does not pull you forward. It walks beside you at the pace you are already moving. If you are still clearly awake, you are welcome here. If thoughts are passing quickly, they are welcome to pass beneath the branches. If you have already drifted away and returned, no part of the story has been missed. The monastery has no examination at the end of the night. You do not need to remember the name of the boatmaker. You do not need to recall what the gardener wrote. You do not need to carry a lesson from each lantern. The stories have already offered what they could. Now they may fade. Imagine the blue boat beneath the first arch. One rope holds it gently. The knot has been checked once. The boat rocks toward the bank and away again. Water sounds softly against the hull. It is ready for morning, but it does not practice tomorrow's journey during the night. It simply floats. Imagine the moon pool beneath the second arch. The surface moves whenever the breeze arrives. Silver breaks into lines. Lines become fragments. Fragments return to a round and quiet moon. No hands enter the water. Nothing is repaired. Imagine the garden beneath the third arch. Leaves lie where the wind placed them. Red beside brown. Gold against dark stone. A few continue traveling along the path. The gardener is asleep. The leaves do not require counting. Imagine the weaving room beneath the fourth arch. The blue-silver leaf catches a little light. Around it, the blanket is warm and finished enough. Someone sleeps beneath it without knowing where the mistake was made. Warmth travels through every thread. Imagine the bridge beneath the fifth arch. The great sack labeled tomorrow rests outside the door. Its straps are loose. Possible storms and unanswered questions sleep inside without becoming real. The traveler carries nothing across the bridge tonight. Imagine the golden water beneath the sixth arch. Lanterns drift in separate circles. Some shine brightly. Some have been lowered for oil. One is dark while its wick is replaced. Every lantern belongs. Imagine the pool beneath the seventh arch. Water moves over the black stone. The stone remains, not rigid, not lost. Moss rests upon its surface. Sand supports it from below. The river continues. These 7 places now become 7 distant lights behind closed eyes. The first grows dim, then the second, then the third. Not extinguished, only farther away. The fourth becomes a faint amber point. The fifth softens into the darkness around it. The sixth joins the stars reflected upon the river. The seventh passes beyond the final route. There is no need to hold their order. Let them become one quiet glow beneath the banyan. Mira remains near the doorway. The lantern beside her is still burning, but she has lowered the wick. Light no longer reaches the far side of the room. It rests upon a small part of the floor and the edge of her robe. Outside that circle is safe darkness. The darkness holds the roof beams. It holds the steps. It holds the branches and every sleeping bird among them. It holds the river beyond what the lantern can show. Darkness is not an empty place into which you might fall. It is the deep color of the room when the eyes no longer need to work. You may let the room become dark. You may let the story become distant. You may let the next sentence arrive without waiting for it. A branch moves above, then stillness. Water touches a root, then stillness. A lantern makes the smallest sound as its metal cools. Then stillness. The stillness after each sound is not truly empty. It contains the whole monastery resting. You are resting within it. Mira tells you that no traveler has ever remained awake forever beneath the banyan. Some slept before reaching the first story. Some listened until the final lantern. Some woke briefly, when wind moved through the leaves, and then returned to sleep without knowing how. The tree welcomed all of them in the same way. It does not measure how quickly sleep comes. Neither should you. The thought, I am still awake, is only another reflection in the bowl. It can move. The thought, I should be asleep by now, is another leaf leaving the branch. It can fall. The effort to make sleep happen is another rope around the boat. It can loosen. You do not need to sleep at this exact moment. You are only asked to remain here, comfortably doing nothing, while the night continues its work. Sleep may approach quietly enough that you never notice its first step. It may begin as a sentence whose ending no longer matters, as an image that changes without explanation, as the feeling that the body is both near and far away. There is no need to identify which sign comes first. Below the room, the boat turns slightly at its rope. The current presses, releases, and presses again. The rhythm is slow. Toward the bank, away from the bank, toward the bank, away. Nothing in the movement requires counting. The aurora has become pale now. It moves behind cloud in broad, soft waves. The stars nearest the horizon disappear and return. A shooting star crosses above the river, brief and silent. You do not have to wish for anything. For these hours, enough has already been given. A bed beneath a tree, a river beneath a moon, a quiet voice that asks for nothing in return. The permission to leave the day unfinished. Mira begins speaking with longer spaces between her words. The banyan is here, the river is here, the night is here. You are held. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not required to become a better version of yourself before morning. This version of you may rest. The one who tried, the one who became tired, the one who knew what to do, the one who did not. Every part may enter the quiet room. There is room beneath the branches. If an old memory enters, Let it choose a place near the doorway. It does not need to come closer. If a future concern arrives, let it place its bag beside the chest. If a feeling has no name, it may sit beside the river without explaining itself. Nothing must leave before you can sleep. Everything may simply become quieter together. The moon moves a little farther west. Shadows turn upon the floor. The bowl beside the bed now reflects only a piece of the sky. Soon it will reflect a branch. Later, perhaps nothing but darkness. Every reflection is allowed. The water remains water. Mira reaches for the lantern. Her hand rests upon the little wheel that lowers the wick. Not yet. There is no hurry even here. She waits through another soft movement of the leaves. Another breath. Another quiet touch of water beneath the roots. Then the light becomes smaller. The far branches disappear first. Then the table. Then the open doorway. Only the lantern remains, a warm amber shape without sharp edges. Mira's voice seems to come from the night itself now. Rest, traveler. The river knows the way through darkness. Rest, traveler. The tree knows how to hold its branches. Rest, traveler. Morning is not asking for you yet. The lantern becomes a single point. The point becomes a glow. The glow becomes warmth remembered behind closed eyes. You may go no farther in the story. You may let the river carry the remaining words. They will pass beside you softly. They will not ask to be remembered. The monastery is settling. The garden is settling. The moon pool is settling. The weaving room is settling. The bridges are settling. The lanterns are settling. The river stones are settling. And beneath the wide and patient banyan, you too may settle. She tells you that the monastery will remain whether you listen or not. The bridges will hold. The river will find its bends. The leaves will turn in the wind without being watched. You may drift beneath the words now. There is water below. There are branches above. There is warmth beside you. There is time. Nothing is asking you to hurry towards sleep. Nothing is asking you to stay awake. The next breath arrives by itself. And the next, each one touches the shore and returns to the river. The lantern beside the bed becomes dimmer, not because it is failing, but because it has completed its work. Mira lowers the glass. Amber light settles across the floor. The shadows become longer and softer. The sacred banyan holds the room, the river, and the sleeping monastery within its branches. It makes room for you too, for every unfinished thought, for every imperfect thread, for the parts of you that are peaceful and the parts that have not yet learned how. Nothing needs to be excluded before you rest. The night is wide enough. The tree is strong enough. The river is patient enough. Let the last clear shapes of the room become less distinct. Let the lantern become only warmth. Let the river become only sound. Let Mira's words become something you no longer need to understand. You are not losing the path. The path is resting. You are not forgetting the world. The world is waiting kindly outside. You are simply sleeping beneath the sacred banyan. The boat rocks once against its rope. The moon rests in the bowl. A leaf touches the river, and the monastery grows quiet around you. The river continues beyond the monastery, although no one standing beneath the banyan can see where it goes. Mira once told you that this is one of the river's quiet teachings. A path does not need to reveal its ending before it can carry you. Water does not wait for a map. It touches the next stone, enters the next bend, and continues. Tonight, while the boat rests against its rope and the lanterns grow dim along the bank, there is one more journey waiting in the darkness. You do not need to sit up for it. You do not need to become more alert. You may remain exactly as you are, warm and supported, while the story moves gently around you. Far upstream, beyond the terraces and the old stone bridges, there was once a village built beside a field of silver grass. In daylight, the grass looked ordinary. It bent beneath the wind and straightened when the wind had passed. But after sunset, every blade caught the moonlight. The entire hillside seemed to hold a pale and trembling sea. An old bell maker named Sori lived at the edge of that field. For most of his life, Sori had made bells for temples, gardens, and fishing boats. Some were no larger than a plum. Others were so heavy that 6 people were needed to lift them. He understood how bronze cooled, how a mold could crack, and how the smallest change in shape could alter a bell's voice. People traveled great distances to buy his work. They often praised the clarity of his bells. Sori accepted their praise politely, but he never believed that a bell belonged to the person who made it. "I make the hollow place," he would say. "The world makes the sound." When he grew old, Sori began work on one final bell. He intended it for no temple and no wealthy household. He wanted to hang it in the silver grass, where anyone walking at night could hear it. He chose his metal carefully. Into the bronze, he placed a broken cooking pot donated by a widow, a farmer's worn buckle, 3 small coins from a child, and a fragment from a temple bell damaged during a storm. Each object had once been useful in a different way. Each had been carried, touched, valued, and eventually released. Sori melted them together. For 7 days he tended the furnace. At night, sparks climbed above the workshop and disappeared among the stars. During the day, the villagers brought rice, tea, and firewood. They asked what note the bell would make. "I do not know," Sori answered. This surprised them. He was the most experienced bell maker in the valley. Surely he could predict his own creation. But Sori only smiled. "If I already knew its voice," he said, "there would be no reason to listen." On the 8th morning, he broke the mold. The bell was not beautiful in the usual way. Its surface carried faint lines from the old pieces of metal. One side was darker than the other. Near the rim was a mark shaped like a small river. The villagers gathered as Sori hung it from a cedar frame at the edge of the field. There was almost no wind. The bell remained silent. They waited. A few people became restless. A child lay down in the grass. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered that perhaps the bell was too heavy. Then a breath of air crossed the hillside. The silver grass leaned. The bell moved by the width of a finger. One low note opened into the evening. It was not loud. It did not command the valley or shake the cedar frame. The sound traveled slowly, touching the roofs of the village, the irrigation channels, and the darkening trees. For a moment, everyone stopped waiting for something impressive. They simply heard it. The note faded, yet the quiet following it seemed changed. Sori sat beside the frame. "Is that all?" a young merchant asked. The old bell maker looked across the grass. "Listen to what the bell leaves behind," he said. Another breeze came. Another note moved through the field. This time, no one asked whether it was enough. Years passed. Sori died, and his workshop became a home for a family of weavers. The bell remained beside the silver grass. Sun warmed it. Rain darkened it. Birds rested upon the cedar frame. Children who had once watched its making returned with children of their own. Some nights the bell sounded many times. Some nights it did not sound at all. People learned that silence was not the bell's failure. Silence was the space in which its voice could arrive. Mira says that your breathing is like this. The breath enters, the breath leaves. Between them is a small, unmeasured quiet. You do not have to fill it. You do not have to hold it open. It appears by itself, like the silence after a bell has spoken. Let the next breath come whenever it comes. The silver grass bends beneath the moon. The old bell waits without impatience, and the night has room for sound and silence together. Many seasons after Sori's final bell was hung, a traveller named Anne came to the village. She carried a small wooden case containing brushes, ink, and sheets of handmade paper. Her work was to copy letters for people who could not write their own. In market towns, she wrote messages to distant children, agreements between farmers, poems offered during courtship, and apologies that had taken years to become possible. Anne had a beautiful hand. Every line appeared balanced. Every character seemed to know exactly where it belonged. Yet she was rarely satisfied. At the end of each day, she remembered only the stroke that had leaned too far, the drop of ink that had spread, or the word she could have placed more elegantly. Praise passed through her like wind through an open gate. Mistakes remained. When Anne reached the village of Silver Grass, rain had begun to fall. She took shelter in the old bellmaker's former workshop, where the family of weavers offered her soup and a place beside the stove. That evening, a farmer arrived carrying a letter. It had been written by his brother, who lived beyond the northern mountains. The farmer had carried it inside his coat for almost a year. The paper was soft along its folds, and some of the ink had faded. "I want to answer him," the farmer said, "but I do not know the right words," and opened her case. "Tell me what you wish him to understand." The farmer thought for a long time. "Tell him the plum tree flowered early. Tell him our mother's roof no longer leaks. Tell him I was angry when he left, but I am tired of carrying the anger. Tell him there is still a place at our table." And dipped her brush. She wrote slowly, allowing each sentence to settle before beginning the next. Outside, rain moved across the field. The old bell sounded once, then again. As Anne formed the final line, A drop of water fell from the farmer's sleeve. It landed on the page. The ink spread through the words. There is still a place, turning the neat characters into a soft black cloud. And stared at the stain. Her chest tightened. The page was ruined. She reached for a fresh sheet, but the farmer placed his hand gently over the wooden case. "Please leave it," he said. The words are blurred. Only those words. They are the most important ones. The farmer looked at the dark shape on the paper. Then my brother will know they were difficult to write. And did not understand at first. She had spent years trying to remove every sign of uncertainty from her work. She believed a good letter should look as though it had arrived without effort, clean and complete. But this letter carried the weather of its writing. The softened ink held the farmer's hesitation, his grief, the rain outside, and the long year in which he had wanted to forgive his brother, but had not known how. The stain did not hide the truth. It became part of it. And finished the letter and allowed it to dry beside the stove. The next morning she walked into the silver grass. Rain beads rested along every blade. The hillside held thousands of small, imperfect reflections of the sky. No drop contained the whole moon. Together they made the field shine, and remained in the village for several weeks. She continued writing letters, but she no longer destroyed every page carrying a crooked line or a softened edge. When a mark revealed something honest about the moment, she let it remain. Her writing did not become careless. It became alive. Mira lowers her voice as she tells you this. Perhaps there were parts of today that did not unfold neatly. Perhaps something you said came out differently from the way you had rehearsed it. Perhaps you were tired when you wanted to be patient, quiet when you wanted to be brave, or uncertain when you believed you should know. The page does not need to be copied again tonight. The day may keep its softened edges. It may carry the weather of its making. Nothing about sleep requires a perfect conclusion. You may rest in the middle of an unfinished sentence. You may leave a question without an answer. You may allow the ink to dry exactly where it fell. Beyond the village, the river widens. The current carries the reflected moon through reeds and beneath low branches. Sometimes the moon appears round and clear. Sometimes ripples divide it into 100 pieces. The water never worries that it has broken the sky. It continues. Downstream from the silver field stood a small ferry house. A woman named Tala lived there with her grandson Bo. Each morning they carried villagers from one bank to the other. Their ferry was a broad wooden platform guided by a rope stretched across the river. Bo loved the work when the weather was bright. He liked the scrape of baskets against the deck, the greetings of passengers, and the moment the ferry left one shore before touching the other. He imagined that for those few minutes they belonged to neither side. But Bo feared the river at night. After sunset, the familiar banks became dark shapes. Water knocked beneath the platform. Reeds whispered where no one could be seen. One autumn evening, a messenger arrived after the ferry had closed. He carried medicine for a child in the eastern hills. "I must cross tonight," he said. Tala lit 2 lanterns and placed them at the front of the ferry. Bo watched from the doorway. His grandmother was old and the current had strengthened after days of rain. "I will come," he said, although fear had already begun moving through him. They stepped onto the platform. Tala released the fastening rope, and the ferry entered the dark water. At first, Bo stared only at the far bank. A single lamp burned near the landing. He fixed his eyes upon it as though looking away might cause the ferry to drift downstream. Halfway across, mist rose from the river. The distant lamp disappeared. Bo tightened his hands around the guide rope. "I cannot see where we are going," he whispered. Tala adjusted one of the lanterns. "Can you see the rope in your hands?" "Yes." "Can you feel the deck beneath your feet?" "Yes." "Can you hear the water against the left side?" Bo listened. "Yes." "Then the river has given you enough for this moment." The ferry continued through the mist. Bo wanted the entire crossing to become visible. He wanted proof of the landing, the bank, and the path beyond it. Instead, there was the rough rope, the steady deck, and the sound of water. He began to notice that the guide rope vibrated differently when the current pushed hard. He felt the small change in balance when Tala shifted her weight. He heard the messenger breathing behind them. The darkness contained information. It simply did not offer everything at once. After a while, reeds appeared beside the ferry. Then, the shape of the landing emerged from the mist. The platform touched the eastern bank so gently that Bo almost did not notice they had arrived. The messenger thanked them and hurried into the hills. On the return journey, the mist remained, but Bo no longer searched for the distant lamp. He held the rope. He felt the deck. He listened to the water. Years later, when Bo became the ferryman, travelers sometimes asked how he crossed safely on nights when the river disappeared. "The river never disappears," he told them. "Only the part I cannot yet see." Tonight, you do not need to see the morning. You do not need to know exactly when sleep will come, how deep it will be, or what thoughts may pass before it arrives. The bed beneath you is the deck. The breath moving through you is the rope. The quiet sounds around you are water touching the ferry. This moment has given you enough. Feel the places where your body is supported. Notice, without effort, that you are not holding yourself above the surface. The mattress carries the weight of your shoulders. It carries your back, your hips, your legs, and your heels. Nothing needs to be lifted. Nothing needs to be guided toward the opposite bank. The crossing is already taking place. Mira sits beneath the banyan as the last ferry lantern disappears around the bend. Above her, the leaves turn their pale undersides toward a soft wind. The branches move, but the great trunk remains quiet. She remembers another teaching from the monastery garden. There was once a novice who believed stillness meant never moving. Each dawn, he sat beside the pond and tried to make his body perfectly rigid. He held his spine too straight. He prevented every small adjustment. When an itch appeared, he treated it as an enemy. When his foot became numb, he became angry with the foot. After meditation, he was exhausted. One morning, the gardener asked him to carry a bowl of water across the courtyard. "Do not spill a drop," she said. The novice gripped the bowl with both hands. He locked his elbows and walked as stiffly as he could. Water spilled over the rim. The gardener refilled the bowl. Try again, but this time, let your arms move with your steps. The novice crossed the courtyard. His hands rose and fell slightly. His shoulders softened. The water remained inside the bowl. Stillness is not the absence of movement, the gardener said. It is movement without struggle. Your breathing moves you. Your heart moves you. Small muscles release and adjust as comfort deepens. You do not need to become a statue before sleep will accept you. You may swallow. You may shift your head. You may move a hand toward a cooler place on the sheet. Let each movement be simple, completed and forgotten. The banyan leaves move without leaving the tree. The river moves without leaving its nature. You may move and still be resting. The night grows deeper now. In the village of silver grass, the bell waits between its notes. Anne's letters rest inside distant homes. The ferry rope hums softly above the dark river. At the monastery, most of the lanterns have gone out. Only one remains beside Mira. Its flame is small and steady beneath the glass. She does not use it to push back the whole darkness. It illuminates the wooden floor, the edge of her sleeve, and a few roots of the sacred banyan. Beyond that small circle, night continues without needing to be conquered. Perhaps the mind has tried to become a lantern for the entire future. It has tried to illuminate tomorrow's conversations, next week's decisions, and paths that have not yet appeared. That is too much work for one small flame. Let the lantern become small again. Let it show only this breath, then this one. There is no need to light the whole road to morning. Morning knows how to arrive in darkness. Mira places one hand upon the banyan root beside her. The wood holds the warmth gathered during the day. Beneath the soil, roots divide and divide again, becoming finer until they can enter spaces invisible from the surface. The tree does not know every stone it will meet underground. It grows around them. It does not argue with the shape of the earth. It receives what can nourish it and releases what cannot. You may do the same with the thoughts passing now. Some may be useful tomorrow. They will return if needed. Some are only echoes of a day already completed. They may move on. Some do not need to be classified at all. Let them pass like small leaves in dark water. There is no examination at the river bend. No one is counting how many thoughts you successfully released. Rest is not a task you can fail. Even wakefulness can lie quietly. Even uncertainty can soften. Even a mind that continues making sound can be held inside a larger silence. Listen for that larger silence now. It may be beneath the voice. It may be beneath the room. It may be the space in which every sound appears and fades. The bell in the silver field sounds once more. Its note crosses the grass. It touches the old workshop, the ferry house, the reeds, and the first stones of the monastery path. The sound becomes softer as it travels. By the time it reaches the banyan, it is almost indistinguishable from the wind. Mira hears it. She smiles, but she does not open her eyes. The bell leaves a quiet behind it. Into that quiet, the river places its low and endless voice. Into the river's voice, the banyan places the movement of its leaves. And into the shelter of those sounds, you may place the weight of this day, not carefully, not perfectly. Simply set it down. The day has already become something that happened. You are allowed to stop carrying it. The ferry is tied, the letters are folded, the bell is resting, the bowl of water is still, the lantern flame lowers. Mira's words become slower and farther apart. There is nothing more you need to remember from these stories. Their meaning does not depend upon your attention. They may continue beneath the surface as roots continue beneath the earth. You may forget the village. You may forget the names. You may forget the river and the field of silver grass. Sleep does not require you to carry any image across its threshold. Let each one fade when it is ready. The bell becomes silence. The lantern becomes warmth. The river becomes a gentle darkness moving nowhere you need to follow. Your next breath is quiet. The breath after that may be quieter still. The muscles around the eyes no longer need to look toward anything. The jaw no longer needs to prepare a word. The hands have nothing left to hold. The feet have nowhere left to go. You have crossed enough distance for one day. Here, beneath the patient branches, there is room for all of you. Room for what went well. Room for what remained unfinished. Room for the page with softened ink. Room for the fairy inside the mist. Room for movement, silence, and sleep. The Sacred Banyan does not ask when you will drift away. It keeps watch without waiting. The river does not ask whether you heard every story. It carries the moon whether anyone is looking. The night does not ask you to be peaceful before it will hold you. It is already holding you now. Somewhere on the far bank, a night bird calls once and then becomes quiet. It does not wait for an answer. The call was complete simply because it was given to the night. You may let this day be complete in the same way. Not because every problem was solved, not because every effort succeeded, not because you became the person you hoped to be in every moment. The day is complete because it has reached its shore. What remains may wait beyond the mist. The ferry will cross again when morning comes. Letters can be opened beneath a brighter sky. The old bell will find another wind. None of these things need your watchfulness tonight. Mira lifts the lantern for the final time. Its amber light passes across the roots, revealing small places where moss has grown between the folds of wood. Then she lowers the flame until only one red point remains. For a few breaths, that point glows like a distant star. Then it too becomes dark. The darkness is not empty. It contains the tree, the monastery, the sleeping boats, and the long river continuing beneath the moon. It contains you without asking you to remain awake inside it. Let the darkness do the holding now. Let the bed do the carrying. Let the breath do the breathing. There is no final doorway you must find. No special thought will unlock sleep. You may simply become less interested in the edges of each word, less interested in where one sentence ends and another begins. Sound loosens into quiet. Quiet opens into rest, and rest asks nothing from you. Allow the final lantern to disappear. Allow the bank to become soft and indistinct. Allow the voice to become only a distant current. Nothing is being lost. Nothing important is being left behind. You are moving into rest in the same way the river moves into the sea. without needing to understand the moment one becomes the other. There is only dark water. There is only quiet sky. There is only the slow shelter of the tree. And for as long as you need it, there is time. Time to soften, time to release, time to sleep.